Who here is wearing clothing? Raise your hand. If you don't, I'm going to assume you're sleeping and not naked. I've spent most of my life working on social and environmental justice issues, so naturally, when I graduated from college, I started a clothing company. This jump from politics to fashion came as a surprise to some people close to me, but I really believe that what we wear matters. See, fashion is the second most polluting industry in the world. 1 in 6 jobs globally are tied back to the industry in some capacity. In the US, less than 3% of the clothing that we wear here is made here. That's down from over 95% in the 1960s. We've outsourced middle-class manufacturing jobs in search of cheap, unregulated labor to deliver lower prices on consumer goods. Now, fashion doesn't have a monopoly on labor abuses or toxins. It just happens to have an abundance of them. And it's also very personal. We all wear clothes. They impact how we think about ourselves and how others perceive us. It's this vast scale and emotional connection that make fashion an important part of changing the world as we know it. I want to start with 4 myths that are getting in the way of that change. The first myth is that somehow we can separate ourselves from the clothing that we wear. In 2013, a factory collapse in Bangladesh killed over 1,000 workers. It was one of the worst tragedies in the garment industry history, and 3 of the 4 have happened in the last 4 years. At the time, I was working on social causes, and I had a closet filled with stuff made by modern slaves in toxic conditions. There was a disconnect between how I was trying to live and the way that I was getting dressed. I felt guilty, and that was healthy because it changed the way that I behaved. But I don't think guilt is the key to changing this broken system. I think we need to find things that we're excited about and move toward them. Just like I can feel bad putting on something made in a sweatshop, I feel great putting on something made by a company that represents and lives out the values that I stand by. Second myth is that sustainability is somehow extra. I believe strongly that environmental stewardship and fair working conditions are not special. They're the way things should be. I don't think we should have to designate businesses that do things right as sustainable or as responsible. Rather, businesses that exploit workers, that pollute waters, that create products designed to be tomorrow's waste, that objectify women and feast on insecurity, that's not business as usual. That's criminal. Thank you. I don't think we have a right to a lot of stuff, but I do believe that we all have a right to things that don't come at the expense of our fellow human beings. The third myth is that somehow we can buy happiness. Clothing can add meaning to an already balanced life, but clothing alone will never give life meaning. Study after study shows that the more stuff we have, it doesn't mean that we're any happier. It just means that we have more clutter. This hopefully presents us with the opportunity to have less and really love the things that we do have, to buy quality and to pay more for products that represent what we stand for. And that's important because our current expectation around price is set in a system that relies on exploitation to keep prices low. And it's not just 5 to 10% more expensive to do things right. It's often 5 or 10 times more expensive. I want to make it clear, though, that I don't think having less stuff, that paying more, that sustainability is a sacrifice. No, it's a shortcut to focusing on the things that matter in life. We often use fashion as a tool to search for some level of external validation. We're chasing status through logos and through trends, but fashion is at its most powerful when it represents who we are inside and the values that we stand and hold for and hold dear. So the final myth is that this is the way it has to be. I strongly believe that we can break this addiction to consumption, that we can do better, that we can produce in ways that are regenerative and not destructive. I look to the organic food movement for inspiration. I remember as a kid growing up in a small town in Michigan, going to the grocery store with my mom and her asking the store manager if there was any organic food in the store, and he looked at her with this blank look. But now, a decade and a half later, that store is filled with organic options. Just look at what's happening with locally grown food in this city in the last decade. We as humans as a culture, have created these problems around exploitation and pollution. That means that they're entirely human constructs. There's no law of nature that says this is the way that we have to act. We've created these businesses and these values, and we can change them. I want you to raise your hand if you could not buy any clothes for the next month, and it wouldn't be a problem. Do you think you could go a full year without adding anything to your closet and still walk around with a shirt on your back? Good. I know that I could. And that puts us in a special position. It means that we don't have immediate needs. It means that we have the power of choice. It's a blessing, it's a privilege, and it's also a huge responsibility. It's not up to those at the bottom of the system to change it, those that don't have the power of choice. It's up to us. What does that look like? It's different for all of us, but here are a few things that I've found helpful. I remember finding out about that factory collapse in Bangladesh and wanting to throw out my entire wardrobe. I quickly realized that, one, I couldn't afford it, and two, the most sustainable clothing, the most sustainable fashion is the stuff that's already in our closet. So I set out to purposefully, knowing that I didn't have any immediate needs, buy the things that I loved. When I'm shopping, I look for things that fit me and fit my personality, because I don't have room in my life, and neither do you, for things that don't excite you. And I know that for me, I can't get excited about something that doesn't match how I'm trying to live my life. So I would encourage you to take this responsibility and not think of it as a burden, but to recognize this is an opportunity to make meaningful choices, meaningful contributions, and focus on what matters in life. Thank you.